That was Mr. Kinetik. You can follow him at Instagram at Mr. Kinetik, Twitter at Mr. Kinetik. Thank you so much for spinning some tunes for us. My name is Brandon Evans. This is the second episode of Wide Awake and Listening. Today I'm really excited. We have two amazing guests. Not only is Kinetik a DJ, but he's also an educator. And then, of course, we have the amazing Andrea Hunley, an educator. And Andrea, if you wanted to introduce yourself, kind of explain why you're here and what you do, that would be awesome.
Sure, thank you. So I am Andrea Hunley, and I am the proud principal at Center for Inquiry School 2. It's an IPS kindergarten through 8th grade school. And this is my 8th year serving as a building administrator. And as everybody knows, the landscape of education has changed so swiftly in the past few weeks. And so I'm excited to be here today to chat with you all about it.
Nice, yeah, and we're definitely going to get into that ever-shifting landscape, definitely. So while Kinetik is switching out from DJ mode to panelist mode, I'm going to start with you on some rapid-fire questions to get us warmed up. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Hey, sorry.
Kinetik, you want to introduce yourself and tell you what you do for a living while you're here?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. My name is Mark Williams. I perform as Mr. Kinetik, but in my daily life and most of my life, I'm Mark Williams, the assistant principal at Fall Creek Intermediate, which is in Hamilton Southeastern Schools. It's a 5th and 6th grade building, about 920 kids or something like that. It's my first year doing that, and my 13th year in education as a public educator. And so that governs a lot of my day from a professional realm. So
I can imagine, yeah.
Yep.
So I was just telling Andrea that we're going to get started with some rapid fire questions,
cool.
Get us warmed up. So this is for both of you. What is the first place that both of you want to go as soon as it's safe and things are back open?
Man.
I know.
I want to go to my mom's house.
No.
That's where I want to go. I want to go and see my parents. My grandmother is there. I want to have a big barbecue, hang out with all the cousins, all the neighbors, everybody. That's what I want to do.
All right. That's a good one.
It makes me feel bad because I didn't think about my family at first when that wasn't. It would be nice to see all my family. My parents will be celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary in May 31st, so it'd be cool if we could all kick it for that. But I guess I really want to go back to school. I want to go to my office and just walk the hallways and just kind of be there. But so
yeah, I definitely thought of like coffee shops and all kinds of things before family. So Andrea's the only good person here.
Oh, man.
All right, so this is a question I've asked the first guest and now you guys. What is an important truth to you that very few people agree with you on?
Oh, wow. You know what?
Yeah.
Okay. Janet Jackson's Control is better than Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Woo-hoo.
I'll go. We can go all day long. Yeah.
I'm with you though. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Andrea?
Man, I think that it would have to be that denim is inappropriate for the workplace.
Oh,
wow.
I say that
that's a hot take, honestly.
Days, teachers love a jeans day. I hate a denim day. I cannot stand it. I think that denim is not appropriate for the workplace. And now here's everybody in their yoga pants, and it's really throwing me for a loop.
Wow.
Those are really good ones. Yeah. So mine is I actually haven't drank alcohol or done drugs since I was 17. And to me, I feel like that is one of the most rebellious or punk things you can do is not drink. And that's like a hot take that most people do not follow or agree with at all. So that is my one that most people don't agree with. All right. And then a final fun question for you guys. If you were a mall store, which one would you be?
Oh, man.
Mine would definitely be Charlotte Russe because I am seriously stuck in like early 2000s. And I definitely try to be the cool hip mom wearing whatever's trendy. And I'm definitely cheap. I need everything to be inexpensive.
All right, I feel you.
Wow. Man, honestly, sorry, you might be able to hear my sump running. I'm down in the basement.
Okay.
I'd probably be JC Penney, man. That's just kind of
All right.
I want to get stuff that's going to work, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like the best thing that you could get. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of money on it. That's like my whole ethos. It's like, how can I get by and keep as much of my money as possible when it comes to stuff I don't really want to buy anyway?
Yeah.
Man, that's a great question, though. I mean, there's a lot of ways that could go.
Right. Yeah. So I was gonna kick it old school and say Sam Goodies. Do you remember the record store? Yeah.
So overpriced, man.
Yeah. That would be my jam.
With the big giant cassette, the big thing the cassette came in. It was like,
yeah, so you didn't steal it? Yeah. I feel it. All right, so to the real topic at hand. So both of you are amazing educators and family people, as we found out. And so I really wanted to have you guys on to talk about the future of education. So this show, Wide Awake and Listening, that we're doing weekly, we're taking deep dives into topics. But more importantly, I really want to talk about what we think the future could hold for those topics, right? And so we did criminal justice reform last week with prosecutor Ryan Mears. This week we're doing education. And so I not being an educator, wanted to learn from you as the experts, but also as I was doing research, I stumbled across a few different things that I kept coming back to. And one was this story, and this is going to get a little deep, but one was this story of, have you guys heard of the thought experiment Theseus's ship?
No.
Okay, so Theseus was in ancient Greece, similar to Hercules. He was the founder of Athens, and he won this big battle on this ship, and had 20 oars and huge ship. And the Athenians, they wanted to keep the ship in the harbor to have it be a historical piece. People could go visit it and blah, blah, blah. And so they had the ship in the harbor, for years, and people kept going and visiting it and celebrating Theseus. But what started to happen, just like anything else, planks would rot, there was holes in the sails, things would happen. And so they started replacing parts on the ship. And then after about 1,000 years of that ship being in the harbor, they had replaced every single piece of the ship. And so the thought experiment is it still Theseus's ship or not, since they've replaced everything, but they're still calling it Theseus' ship? And I actually thought that was a really striking story for the time we're in now. We're being forced to change and forced to do all these things that we otherwise might not have been capable of or even thought of. And so the first question I wanted to kind of go into is, as educators, I know you guys are constantly changing your tactics, constantly changing what's happening. But do we still call the same model of education anymore, right? So obviously there's e-learning, there's mobile learning, there's all these things that was unthinkable probably 10 years ago, let alone further. And so is that still education? And so I wanted to ask, as parents first, and both of your parents, what do you think of mobile learning as parents first? And then secondary, what's your view on it as educators?
Wow. So mobile learning as parents and then as educators. Mm-hmm. Let's see. My son is only 5, and so he was in preschool when all this started. So there was we are the mobile learning for him. Yeah. Now we're in a unique situation. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and so Walter is, he can kind of cozy up to a lot of the work that she's doing with her students, and it kind of works well that way. But man, it's been kind of tough, just kind of, he would obviously rather be with his peers. And so it's been really hard to kind of, at least my experience has been, we can kind of work on those things that will keep you occupied and keep your mind engaged, but we can't replicate the social environment. So that's been the hard part. It's just kind of, and I bet all the parents probably agree with that. It's I can't give you a classroom full of kids. I can give you the work though. But, and then as a teacher, I mean, I know in my mind, this is just we're just kind of keeping things afloat right now. I don't expect any kids to make a whole lot of growth during this. The hard part is that kids who are already struggling in school, I'm sure that they're struggling just as much, if not more, not being there. So and I was a special education teacher for most of my career. So my background is with students who struggle in school for one reason or another. And I keep thinking about all my students who are already having a hard time and how hard this probably has to be. And I wonder, like, the gap between where they were in comparison to a typically developing peer, however you want to name it. I'm really concerned about where they will be when we come back, because our high flyers, I guess, our high ability, whatever you call it, gifted and talented, whatever you call it, they'll probably be able to at least maintain their retention of information and their ability to apply that information. But students who are struggling and already needed that additional support, they're now not getting that additional support. And it's going to be really difficult to kind of get them caught up when we get back. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think that, you know, as a mom, so I've got two kiddos, 9 and 11, and I'm really fortunate that they are, that they're really independent learners, and that they know how to follow a schedule and they create their own schedules. And so for me, I really have it made in that, like, I have a child who, you know, is an ideal, you know, home learner, and who's really motivated and allow me to do my own work. But I'll tell you that even with that, they're craving the social aspect of school. They're craving that ability to collaborate. And, you know, as a principal, I'm in a school that is really wonderful in that we focus on, like, John Dewey's method of, like, co-constructing knowledge and this whole constructivist piece, which means that kids are supposed to be working in small groups and figuring out problems and then coming to their own solutions. And all of that is gone. And so, you know, there are some great benefits to being able to do, you know, a lot of things in this kind of flipped environment that we have, but there are also some real challenges. And I think that co-construction of knowledge is a thing that we're really, really missing. I think we're going to be missing for a long time too.
Right. And to some of those challenges that you spoke of, I think another thing is this has highlighted the disparities that we have in all of society, but definitely kids that are impacted maybe the most by it. I think the one that's most common talked about is access to Wi-Fi or broadband internet. And I was looking it up earlier. In IPS alone, it looks like nearly 39,000 students don't have access to the internet. And so, let alone outside of different school districts that everybody works for, and then expand that to the whole state. That's kind of crazy to me that there's that many kids that don't have access to school right now, basically. And I know different districts are taking different steps to help that, but I wanted to see what other disparities are being highlighted or are being shown through this time and this pandemic that we're going through.
Well, with the internet, the biggest thing is that it doesn't have to be that way. Like, we as a society have allowed that system to exist. It doesn't have to be that way. Internet could be a utility just like water and just like electricity, but we've chosen not to make it that way. And so I think that that's the most frustrating thing right now, is that, like, we're allowing this to happen. We're allowing for these gaps to exist. We're allowing for there to be a huge difference between the haves and the have-nots. And so we're allowing for this whole group of children right now to fall even further behind. And it is so infuriating, and it's such a crying shame. But I know that, you know, building leaders and superintendents and lawmakers are really trying to work to push, you know, legislation through Congress. But, you know, even with, you know, our local government, like, we could have citywide Wi-Fi if we wanted to, but we don't. And so those are things that are just so frustrating. And so I think that we've got to get that fixed really fast. And we've got some Band-Aids going. We're, you know, giving out mobile, you know, Wi-Fi hotspots to families. You know, we're getting technology into the hands of kids, but those are just Band-Aids. And so we need some real systematic change with that.
Yeah. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
Not to that thread. I'm right there. Yep. I agree with all of that. And honestly, I've been thinking about that for a long time. Really, the whole time I've been an educator, just been thinking about the internet. Because we have it at school and we say that it's such a great tool and kids need to know how to use it and they got to have all this time with it. And then a bunch of kids go home every night and they don't have it. So I've always been thinking about how that's kind of ludicrous, for lack of better terms. The other disparity I would say is that the difference in home education. So Shirley Bryce Heath, I can't remember the exact name of the study, but she did a study for like 30 years in 3 different towns about the way that just information and literacy was developed at home, and how different people would read print and they would talk about print and read it at the same time. Some people would just read it and not talk about it. Some people never really looked at it, but they would share stories orally. And so when kids go home, there's an assumption that they'll have that support. But I think a lot of kids, it depends on who they have at home. Like Walter is fortunate that, I mean, both his parents are educators. And so we can do best practice instruction with him when he comes home, and we'll be able to do that as long as we, are in our right minds or whatever. But some people, even though they are highly educated, highly skilled, they don't know how to do instruction when it comes to like another student. So the kids come home and they have work. And a lot of times we're like, I'll get somebody to help you with it. Even if there is somebody there, we're assuming that they have the ability to even support them with their needs as a learner. And I think a lot of parents, because they're not trained, they just don't have that. So it's a lot more complicated than sitting next to somebody and saying 5 + 5 is 10. So that's, how many ways can you make 10? Like that, even that comment, how many ways can you make 10? Some people are like, what do you mean? How many ways can you make 10? It's just these things that educators, we do so naturally and fluidly because we know it. We send kids home and we give them this work, and we might be thinking like, oh, they could probably help them with it, but that's not really accurate. And that was a problem before all of this, but I can only imagine how exacerbated it is now. Mm-hmm. Especially if you have students who are not, independent learners. They may be skilled learners, but they're not as independent. They're more interdependent. So they need, that kind of guidance. Those are the kids that are going to ask more questions in class and stuff like that. They, I just wonder how my kids are like managing that, because I know just because they have good parents at home or good family at home, that doesn't mean that they're good teachers. So,
right. Yeah. And to that, earlier you talked about some of those challenges, and you also talked about being a special educator, mm-hmm. Mark. What do you think those type of students are facing right now, or what the pandemic is like for them comparatively to, the more gifted students, or just students who are like hanging out, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, so what we're saying when we say that a student is eligible for special education services is that there is some kind of eligibility underneath the law that they are eligible for additional support and additional services. So they're immediately not getting that. So we're immediately out of step because they're not able to access their education in the same way that they would be able to access it. So you could say they're immediately behind just because they're not getting what they're supposed to get. So I think about students that are in different levels of RTI, which is response to intervention. So different students that are being provided support that way, small groups and pull out and all that kind of stuff that we do. We're talking about 30 minutes or 45 minutes of instruction that's targeted with maybe no more than 5 kids with an adult that's skilled on whatever we're doing. Those kids needed that before, and now they're not getting it at all. Like, honestly, it's hard for me to wrap my head around what it's going to really do, because I've never seen it happen. So like if we don't provide you your services, we're out of compliance. That could be a big issue, lawsuits, due process. There's a whole big old thing you don't want to get into if you're not doing that. So we do it. But this is kind of like, I can't tell you what that's going to look like, because we've never been, basically everybody in the state is going to be out of compliance. Now, I don't know. I guess maybe you could possibly do Zoom lessons to, to still facilitate that and kind of meet those minutes. But even that would not really be, enough. I mean, it's really an area where I keep thinking about it, and I'm like, man, this is going to be interesting when kids come back. And even just to get back in the routine of that. So who knows? It's kind of that's probably one of the bigger unknowns for me as a building leader, is like, what is that going to look like? And every day I have to ask that question, and every day I have to just tell myself, I don't know, which doesn't make it, which is hard. So.
Well, and I think that with that, like you talked about, doing Zoom lessons, these pieces, and like we've got teachers all over this whole country, who are being really innovative and trying to do that. But even if they do that, it's once a week, not 4 times a week or 5 times a week. Oh. And then our teachers have all these barriers to technology too. I had staff members who didn't have Wi-Fi at home to be able to do it. So we have to do that for them. Or, at the beginning of this, now we're expecting teachers to post videos of themselves doing instruction online. I had teachers who didn't even know how to attach a file to an email. So like, imagine the leaps that folks are making, between today and, what they were doing 7 weeks ago. We're asking adults to do a lot in order to help the kids.
Yeah, and I will say I'm seeing some chat happen, some questions happen. We had dozens of questions asked through the initial forum, so thank you guys for doing that. But if you have more, if things are popping up in your mind as we're talking, there's a Q&A function you can use at the bottom, or you can throw it in the chat either way, and I'll look at it and I'll make sure it gets asked for you. I know there's a ton of unknown in this situation, right? Like there's a ton of, you don't know how things are going to reopen, you don't know how things are going to happen, right? But what are some steps that you would like to see in the local government, school boards, and state government do to help kind of alleviate some of these challenges that you guys are facing as educators and parents?
I know the big one for me is we have got to figure out how to make like the internet a public utility. Like I know like that has to be, in my opinion, has to be like the first thing that is broadly discussed and figured out. Now I don't expect it to be done in 6 months, but I think that this has proven what we have always known as educators, that it was not okay that it was like that, because basically we were creating a gap, or allowing the gap to exist when some people have it and some people don't. And we would never let some people have access to electricity and some people not have access to it now. Like we would work to try to figure that out and have worked to figure that out. That would be the first thing I would say. And then I might be on a limb on this, but I think people really need to consider standardized testing, and like, because we're not doing it this year. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to probably think about, if we cannot do it, like the school is not like our schools are still going to be open. The locks are going to work. There will be desks there when we get back. The kids will show up whenever we can come back. So if we didn't do it this year, we need to really ask ourselves, what was the value of doing it anyway? And what was it really about? And why was it connected to some of the things it was connected to? Because now it's just going to kind of be like, don't even worry about it. It's basically what they're going to say. Don't worry about it for this year. And so if it's good enough to be able to say that in this time, I just wonder then, because it's a lot of money that's being spent on that, what could we be spending that money on instead if we're willing to say, you don't have to do it?
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think a couple things that I'm hopeful that they'll work on for when we come back. So some, like with my operations hat on, you know, I'm thinking about just like logistics, like what does it look like to say to a school of, you know, 700, 800, 900 students, you can't gather in groups of more than 100. Like, what does that look like? You know, are we going to be eating lunch in the classrooms? Are we going to be, you know, spacing our desks 6 feet apart? Well, how do you work together collaboratively on, you know, doing some of these amazing science experiments that we do, you know, like working on our physics projects of building roller coasters? Like, how do you do that? And so I think that just really needing folks with in building knowledge at the table when these decisions and guidelines are being made, I think is going to be very important, because there are all of these nitty gritty things that happen that, you know, people in their ivory towers have no idea about. And then, you know, from my instructional lens, I really worry about all of the social emotional learning that we're going to need to focus on. You know, like we talk about brain aligned strategies, we talk about ensuring that, you know, kids who are experiencing trauma have what they need. We have got to put our money where our mouth is with that. And we've got to ensure that our buildings are staffed with social workers, counselors, because every single baby right now is experiencing trauma. I don't care if you've got 2 parents at home and a grandma and an auntie help take care of you. This is static. You know, our kids are being separated from everything to be normal. And so we've got to make sure to, you know, embrace them, heal, and return to a whatever that is when it happens.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into, I was about to ask about, how do you think kids are handling mental health, and how do you think that this trauma is going to affect them in the long term? We know in the short term, we've talked about these challenges that they're facing and the gaps in learning they may experience, but how do you think this happens in the long term? Like, we obviously have seniors right now who are about to graduate and don't get a graduation. College, you know, freshmen who are going to not go to college for the first year, probably they have college because, you know, why would they? And so talk a little bit about what you think the long-term effects of this trauma could be, and and how we could like help or mitigate as, you know, as you guys as educators, but also just as people and community members and neighbors, how we could like help and make that better for these kids.
Man, one of the groups of people I think about it would be like senior high school athletes that we're really counting. This sounds superficial, but it's real. That we're counting on like this season for whatever reason. So it's like, man, my senior year, I'm about to go hard. You know, I'm gonna try to get my stuff together and be able to, you know, get out of wherever I'm at or going to what I've always dreamed of. And so,
Ball is life.
yeah, ball is life, you know? So like, I think especially track, I coached track for 4 years, a unified track. And so I was around a lot of athletes, and I know that senior year is really important for some sports. It's like the season. It's not quite like basketball and football where like if you have good junior year, a lot of times you should be fine. But you know, so that's one of those things, a long-term effect, because what that impacts for some students is that was the difference between them going to college and not going, which unfortunately the college and higher ed system is set up where, you know, if you don't have any money, you got two options. You're either going to be in debt or you're not going to go. Well, three, or you can get, you know, a scholarship or something like that for athletics or whatever. And so not having that, I wonder about how many kids are going to be in a spot that they, you know, that they basically are going to miss out on something that they would have been able to have. So now they'll have to take an alternate path that maybe they weren't ready for. Maybe they don't have the resources to take an alternate path. Maybe that was the path. So that's a long-term effect I think about. And then for my fifth and sixth graders, man, I just think about the lack of closure, especially with sixth graders going into another building. You know, the springtime, if we're being honest, in my opinion, springtime is my favorite time of the school year. So springtime and then the beginning of school up to like Thanksgiving, there's like 1, 2. And then the wintertime is like, it's hard. So the spring is when you have all these events, and a lot of it is about like the experience that you get from the events and the closure that you get from the events, the things you can develop. I just really wonder, like, without having those things, what would that, like, what is that just sense of openness? I said like our last day was March 13th. And so one thing I told my principal was like, I hope at some point every school everywhere has one more day of school with the same group of people in the same buildings they were in before all this started. And the only reason why is because I know for a lot of kids, they're going to need to see all of us one more time, get to say goodbye, get to get all that stuff signed, you know, shirts and all the different kind of things that go on, just so they can have that sense of closure, because that's it's hard to not have closure when we're adults. And so I can only imagine what it would be like, you know, when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, to feel like something is just it just never ended in a way, or it ended very poorly. So.
Right. Yeah.
And I think giving kids, like right now, the permission to mourn, the permission to be sad. And, you know, I think that we often, you know, we'll do comparison, right? So like, well, I don't really have it that bad. Like I still have a roof over my head and I still have food, you know, and we kind of do that and we minimize our grief. And I think that we need to allow kids and allow ourselves to mourn, to be sad. It's okay to hurt because we're not having closure. It's okay to hurt because you don't get your football season, or because you're not getting to see your friends in the same class and have recess with them. Like, it's okay to be sad. And I think that we've got to focus on resilience when we come back and just remind our kids how strong they were during this time, how strong they are, and then keep building off of that when we return.
That's really good. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to switch to the questions, the Q&A that have been coming in. If you can imagine this, a bunch of educators and teachers asked a lot of questions. And so we have a lot. And so I want to get through some of these to make sure people get their questions answered. We're gonna start off hot here. How can I encourage my white parent peers to be mindful of showcasing privilege and show them how it affects families of color?
Show them how to what with families of color?
And how it affects families of color.
So basically,
well, I think that one of the things, though, that Mark kind of brought up earlier is that it's not even just families of privilege showcasing it to, you know, to families of color, but it's even to their own peers, because not everyone is positioned to be an educator. And so even wealthy families who, you know, could take trips to Paris if they wanted to are still struggling right now. And so I think that we need to be really careful about the images that we put out. I got criticized by a parent at my building for, I do these daily announcements, and she was like, I'm so sick of seeing you on the daily announcements, pretending like everything is perfect in your household and you're making me feel like crap. you know, and so I think that we all need to be really cognizant of that. And then I think that you know, that crosses race lines and it crosses poverty lines right now.
Yeah. You got thoughts, Mark?
You know what? No, not that are too different than that, because man, you know, there's not a lot of times where I would say it does cross those lines, but I feel like it does right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, definitely, you know, the impact is going to be different for different people, just because. So, like, for example, what was it, a couple of weeks ago when I saw that, like, African Americans in Marion County were like 3 times as likely to get COVID-19. I mean,
Yeah.
I live in Marion County, so for me, that was like, I definitely am not really trying to go anywhere, and I think when you have certain conversations like that, it could come up there, because some people might feel like I know people go and play golf and stuff this weekend. So it could be one of those situations where people are like, I don't really see, you know, it's going to be all right, blah, blah, blah. And I think I like to lean on stats. Like, I think these statistics are probably under what's really going on. So if this is what we know, I mean, my risk, like my risk management approach is going to be different, just because of the predominance of who is affected. So that's one area. But other than that, we all at home, and everybody trying to figure out what they're going to do with their kids and what they're going to do with their families. So really, hopefully this will be a time where, you know, we can have some greater and more richer and fuller equity conversations, because hopefully now people will be like, I didn't want to engage in that before, but now because I'm a part of it. I hate that it's like that, but I know in America sometimes people want to feel it before they believe it. So hopefully now that people feel it, maybe when we start to have those committees that start back up when we get back and all that kind of stuff, maybe we'll see greater turnout. Maybe we'll see more leverage for the work, because it's a shared experience if I've ever seen one. So
yeah, we're all under it right now. And to that, what do you think is something that's given you hope that Indianapolis has done during this pandemic for either for kids in education or just in general?
I'm feeling really proud of our mayor right now, and the fact that he's continuing our stay-at-home order, and the fact that they've opened up, you know, mobile testing sites in our neighborhoods where folks are most at risk. And I just so proud of seeing, you know, in the newspaper, the images of the cars lined up at Eastern Star. And it's really powerful that, you know, that he cares and that he's taking care of the Black community. And so that's something that's giving me hope that maybe this will continue, and that people will realize that sometimes we do need to do big, bold things to take care of our community.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was joking on Twitter earlier today. The governor announced, you know, his big plan to reopen. And I asked who's going to sit the virus down and talk about county borders, you know, like I don't care. And so
oh man,
it's a wild world we live in, for sure. So there was a combination of this question multiple times, but how do you guys feel about the current funding mechanisms for school with the complexity index? And how it impacts poverty. Districts are dealing with poverty in general, and in general how funding goes to students or travels with students to schools right now. And what do you think by that? There was like 8 different variations of that question. So,
to be honest, I've been kind of prioritizing my thoughts around things. I hadn't even thought that hard about all of that. And now as I sit here, and, you know, there's people watching, they're probably, man, yeah, you hadn't thought about that. I guess the one thing that I am thinking about that's kind of related to that is that I expect enrollment numbers to be kind of funky when we come back. Either because I think we don't know who they are, but there will be people who decide not to send their kids for one reason or another. And the way that ADM works and enrollment, and, you know, when you count is based off of how much money you get and all that kind of stuff like that. The issue will be, so I'll use like a practical example. Since Walter's in kindergarten, if we start school remote, there's no way I'm sending him to kindergarten. We've already talked about this as a family. It's not happening. because if he starts remote, that means we're starting remote, which means why would I even, he'll turn 6 in March of next year, so we can just keep him and send him again, because I don't want him to have a kindergarten. I don't want his whole school experience to start online and like, here's your class. Like, I just am not, no. So there are plenty of parents who probably agree with that. So that's going to mess up kindergarten numbers. Well, you know, administrators, we know, okay, so if we don't have enough kids to have the classes open, we got to put teachers somewhere else and we got to shift them around. So that may work for now or through January or even through this school year. Well, next year when we have all these people that re-enroll their kids, we're going to have like a staffing issue. So like, hopefully no school districts will cut any spots based off of enrollment now, because it's definitely going to be different next year. So that in terms of like money following kids, if kids don't ever show up, then the money doesn't ever show up. So, but that doesn't mean people don't need the money. So it gets real complicated. But yeah, I hadn't even the taxing side of it and stuff like that. I hadn't even thought too hard about that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the other piece with that too is that like we are not a district that's been one-to-one with technology. So like we're spending $12 million right now to do that. And like, you know, that money has got to come from somewhere. Some of it is coming from, you know, the government funds, but some of it's not. And so that, you know, that's a big chunk. But we're definitely going to have to do something with our count day. Like it will not be able to be in mid-September. I think that they're going to have to shift some thinking with that on what day they count students, and then they determine our funding from that.
Right, and some of the ideas I heard tossed around were ideas of like enrollment freeze of the count actually, so and stuff like that. And I also saw multiple Republicans push back on that in the article. So I feel like that's going to be an ongoing battle for those that aren't politically connected. Next year is a budget session also.
Mm-hmm.
Where all of our elected officials in the state house will go and decide on our budget for the next 2 years. And I have a feeling that for multiple reasons, right, we're going to have a tax shortage, we're going to have a budget crisis, and we do have plenty of reserves. But what do they do with that money? Do they actually spend it, or do they just, you know, do people suffer until taxes come back to normal, or where they're at, or where they were at previously to this? And so those are like all huge issues that we're going to have to deal with.
Well, and if you remember back to, you know, a few months ago when all of our teachers were at the State House talking about, you know, their teacher pay, but then also this tie of teacher evaluation and pay to testing, and, you know, all of these pieces that we had such momentum around. So we also need to make sure that we don't lose that momentum because our teachers and our educators are strained with trying to figure out what this new normal is going to be. And so that's kind of a concern that I have. But I also know at the same time, people are loving their teachers more than ever before, because now they realize that this is a challenging job. It's not just made up for anybody, and just because we make it look easy doesn't mean that it is. And so I really think this is going to help professionalize the profession, you know?
I hope so, yeah. I don't know how you guys do what you do, I'll be honest. So a couple of other questions that we had were, for those of us not in the education field, how can we best support teachers, educators, administrators right now for what you guys are doing? Because it is obvious it's critical to our future in our society to have good teachers. And so how can we support you in that?
I'll say you need to know who your state rep is. You need to know who your state senator is. You need to know all those people that you vote for that are on the ballot. You need to know who all those people are. You need to know how they feel about schools, because I can tell you right now. So I live in, what's his name? Jim Merritt is my state senator. Bosma's my state rep. And I know their voting record on education, and it's trash. I'm just going to keep it all the way real. It's never really been that great or supportive. And I know that may be divisive to some people, but the facts are the facts. You can go and look. They've never really done anything or been behind any really strong, you know, much needed reform. If anything, they've been a part of different reforms that have made things more complicated. Like they were both, you know, in support of changing how we do bargaining. They were both in support of, you know, kind of not putting, you know, the voucher item, you know, the budget item, like how much money we spent on vouchers. They were both down with keeping that, you know, kind of in the whole total. So we don't really know the exact amount. they've been involved with a lot of different things that just haven't been helpful. So what I know is they want to keep their jobs. So when you know who your rep is and your senator is, now you may not be able to bump them, but if you know who they are and you get behind people that support education, I mean, your votes matter. Now, I know some people are like, my vote doesn't, what was my vote? Your vote matters is staying local. Now, you can say whatever you want about national, but staying local, those people make decisions that have created so many, all the problems that have ever been created in my career since 2008 came out of the General Assembly. So it didn't come out of the superintendent. It didn't come out of my principals. It came from the General Assembly. And so we have to do what they tell us to do based off of the law. So if you want to be helpful, you got to know who your people are. And then if they're not down with schools, because they're not going to be, I'm telling you right now, I hate to get into about the reality is they're not going to change. They're going to be who they are. They're going to still be on the same stuff they were on before all this happened. And I have a very strong feeling that the whole session is going to be a mess whenever we start talking about schools, because people are going to show you that they are exactly who they have been. So you need to know who your people are, because I bet a lot of people don't know who their rep or their senator, you know. And those are people who make decisions all the time, especially in the supermajority. They got a lot of sway. So,
yeah, I think that's.
And I think just to say, yes, to say to people, pay attention. You know, next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. Like, that's the best way to show your appreciation, is to pay attention and then take some action. You know, it doesn't take long to make a phone call, to send an email. So paying attention and taking action. And then I think the other way that parents can help right now is by getting their kids off their screens. I'm having so much anxiety about these kids coming back to school being like little terrible screen monsters, because, you know, their parents are exhausted and hand them the iPad, or exhausted and turn on the television. And so I think that I'm glad that the weather is getting nicer so that kids can get outside. But I think that getting your children off screens, making sure that they're active, and then also making sure that they have time to be still. Like, let your kids be bored. It is okay. And that is where creativity restores itself. And so we need to just ensure the kids that time.
Nice, yeah. All right, last question. What are you two doing to stay grounded amid this chaos? Talk a lot about kids, but what are you guys doing?
Well, for me, it's springtime, so I'm outside in my garden, you know, every day. You know, that's kind of my thing. The flower festival at my house is always happening. So that's really, I guess the reason why I mentioned gardening is because I feel like there are a lot of things to learn from being a gardener, and from paying attention to your plants. The biggest thing being that none of them are the same. Even if you buy two of them from the same place, the same type, when you get them home, they're both going to act differently. They're going to need different things. And that's been my mom shared that with me a long time ago. An educator told her to tell me that, you know, your kids are like plants. They all bloom at different times and need different things. And that's something I think about a lot. So that's a way to just, plus I love it. So it's a way to stay grounded in that. And then, man, just continuing to be immersed in music. I spend a lot of my time either playing music or thinking about music or writing music or talking about music. You know, much of my wife and my son, they're like, okay, we get it. But that's kind of my thing. Really, it's just because I feel like music communicates so many different things that are hard to say, or cannot be said in any other way. So that's kind of just my way to just stay, you know, and, you know, where I'm at, and really just enjoying being at home with my family. Honestly, before all of this, you know, I can't remember a time I spent this much time uninterrupted at my house with my family. Spent a lot of time working. I've always had a lot of different jobs and long hours, especially in the spring when I was coaching. I was gone, you know, 2-3 nights a week until 6-7 o'clock, you know, miss my son going to bed and all that kind of stuff like that. And it's kind of nice to just be here and just be with my people. I wish we could get into different circumstances, but I'm really enjoying that part. It's really helpful. So,
Nice.
yeah.
I love that you mentioned gardening, because I'm not a gardener, but I was going to say that the way that I'm staying sane is by pruning, by like cutting out things that that I don't want to do, saying no to, you know, like you get Zoom overload, like just by saying no to things. And then there's also been a few boards in the community that I've been on for a long time, and that I've just done some soul searching during this time and just thought, you know, what's really important to me right now, and what are those things that I can just say goodbye to. And so that's been one piece that I've done. And then I'm a terrible musician, but I love to play music. And so I play the ukulele, and it's kind of a thing at our school. Our music teacher like teaches ukulele to the kids when they're in middle school. And so I have a ukulele, and every Friday we do a school-wide Zoom assembly, and we all have a song of the week that if you have a ukulele at home, you can play along with. And so I've been making sure that I know the song of the week each week. Today it was Bob Marley's Three Birds, and it was so great. And so we've been jamming on that all around my house. But we've just been enjoying music and enjoying family time.
That's perfect. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you guys want me to ask?
Let me look at my notes.
Wow. It's very, very, very. Let me look at my notes.
You're great.
I don't know if there's anything I thought you would ask, but there is something I will like to bring up just since I'm a part of two big communities, one of them being education and the other one being music and entertainment. I hope that people remember our musicians and our artists in this time as much as you can. I don't know. I'm not expecting you to take out a second mortgage to try to support anybody or anything like that. But I know like today Bandcamp is waiving their revenue sharing. So everything that's sold on Bandcamp, 100% of it goes to the musicians. I know the Jazz Kitchen and the Indie Jazz Fest are involved in kind of like a musician, kind of like some grants for emergency grants for that. Even if it's just, I don't know, maybe you take some time if you got Spotify or whatever, you just say, I'm going to listen to local artists more today, or I'm going to try to find, whatever you can do. I just think that our arts community really relies on people being able to show up for their, to see the art and complete the artwork. And so not having that, I got a lot of friends that they're struggling. The clubs are closed, the venues are closed. And it's kind of hard to imagine that it'll all return in the same way that it will. So I guess now the next step is like, we're going to anticipate it shrinking. And as much as I love our arts community here, it's growing all the time. So we really, I just want to put that out there for anybody that's listening, just to like, to remember those people too. Cause I hate that like the narrative a lot of times is starving artists and like, oh, you should have got a job. And it's that kind of vibe that people give artists sometimes, but that is their job. That's their life. That's their passion. And some of our students are going to choose the same thing. And I think we have a unique opportunity as adults to show our kids what we support and what we think is important in this time as well. So that's, just something to think about.
Where do you prefer people check out your music at?
I don't know, on the internet, but really just Mr. Kinetik. If you look up Mr. Kinetik on the internet, I'm the only Mr. Kinetik that does anything under the name in the world as I know of. So you just Google my name or go to Twitter or Instagram or really, I don't want it to be about me too much. So my friends that rely on that, they need that way more than I do right now. So it's nice if you're going to listen to my music, but go see what I'm doing and then go follow my friends that are doing stuff because they need that.
You, Andrea, did your notes tell you anything?
No, you did a great job of ensuring that all my talking points were hit. I appreciate it.
Wait, you really had notes?
Oh no, I wasn't kidding. I like have to do my homework.
Oh no.
Yeah. But Brandon, just thank you for what you're doing out in the community. I mean, I think that this is really important. Oh, I gotta get a close up of my pin here. It's the Wide Awake and Listening logo here. I wore my lapel pin today for you. But thank you so much though, just for what you're doing in these Friday conversations and the dance party, obviously at the beginning too. So thank you.
Dance party is pretty important, let's be honest. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here in general. I really enjoyed this conversation. This was awesome. I really enjoyed spending time with you guys. You're great people, and so that always helps. Check out next week, next Friday, we're going to be doing another one. I'll give you a sneak peek. We're going to be doing the future of journalism. I won't tell you the guests yet, but there's some good ones, and so you'll want to check that out. And otherwise, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Braden.
Yeah, bye, guys.
See you. All right, some of that awkward moment where everybody